In this video, we'll take a look at how to install and configure ZENworks reporting. The use case here is that you want to be able to run either the canned reports that come with the various products, or you want to be able to generate custom reports and dashboards against one of the following endpoint management products: the ZENworks Configuration Management, ZENworks Asset Management, ZENworks Patch Management, ZENworks Endpoint Security Management, and ZENworks Full Disk Encryption reports and domains are all included as part of the ZENworks install. And so when you set up ZENworks reporting, you can point at your ZENworks server and you'll immediately get all of the reports and the domains for those. Micro Focus Desktop Containers and Micro Focus Service Desk domains are available. The Desktop Containers domain is available on the Cool Solutions website at this moment, and the Micro Focus Service Desk is available directly from Novell. You actually have to currently get a Novell employee involved. We hope to change that soon and make that available either as part of the product or on the Cool Solutions page. The requirements are, first, it's only available as a virtual appliance, so you have to have a hypervisor. We currently support the VMware, Hyper-V, and XenServer hypervisors. Zen reporting must be able to communicate with your directory server, be that Active Directory or eDirectory, for user authentication. And if you're going to be doing scheduled emails or scheduled reports, ZENworks reporting will need credentials for sending emails. The process for installing is to first import the virtual appliance. You download that from download.novell.com or from the Novell Customer Center. Add a second hard disk. That second hard disk will have all of the configuration that you create, all of the reports, all of that, as well as the IP addressing and whatnot. That way, when a new appliance comes out, you'll be able to just disconnect the old disk, connect it to the new appliance, and then power it on. It will then import your configuration from that second disk, and then you'll be able to continue forward. Then you boot the appliance and answer a minimum set of questions. This includes things like the root and Zen admin password, the network configuration, NTP configuration, and second disk configuration. After that, everything is done through the appliance web console, which runs on port 9443, and so you'll use that. So let's go ahead and take a look at how you do this. What I have here is a VMware environment where basically I'm using VMware Workstation as the console, but the VM has actually been imported onto my vSphere setup. If I come in here, I can start by editing the virtual machine. And again, I'm going to need to add a second hard disk to this. So we'll go with a hard disk. We'll make it 100 gig. And now we'll have our second disk. Again, this is where all your configuration data will be stored. Once that's in place, we can now power on the virtual machine. And so it'll go through the normal setup process. You'll see it go ahead and boot the Linux appliance. It'll take just a minute, and then it will go into the YAST setup screen so that you can specify the core information that it needs to get up and running. So we'll start by accepting the license agreement. And then we'll answer just a few questions. So again, you'll first see we need to specify the root password. This is how you will log into the appliance console, and the Zen admin password, which is also available via the appliance console, so you can log in as the Zen admin. You'll specify your NTP server. In my case, that is a local server that is my domain controller, and I'll also do one of the time servers at Novell. You'll then pick your time zone. So in my case, I'm in Mountain. You'll need to give it a name. It uses SSL, so the SSL certificate will be minted for the name. And then you need to specify the IP address unless you're doing DHCP. So in my case, that's this. And the rest of this is all right. I'll say next, and it will now configure the time zone. It will attempt to validate that I've got the appropriate NTP system. So here you can see it now wants to make sure it knows which disk to use, since you only have one other disk For your second disk, you can just specify that. It'll then finalize the configuration, configure the storage, and then it will boot up to a command screen where it will tell you how to connect to the appliance console. So you'll see now that it's come up to this screen and you can see how to access the appliance console. So we're going to go to this URL. So we'll come over here. You'll see I'm at that URL. I can now log in as root with the credentials that I entered during the setup. Log in. And it will detect that I've not configured this server before. I can then go ahead and specify CSR. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do the SSL on this box. Generally speaking, what you're going to do is you're going to hit the generate CSR. You're going to give it the name of the server, the organization, where you're at, and the key length. You'll generate that, and then you can download the CSR. That CSR you'll then open up, put on your clipboard, or you'll send to your favorite certificate authority. In my case, my certificate authority is using Active Directory Certificate Services. So I'll go ahead and authenticate to my server and request a certificate. We'll paste that in here, tell it we want a web server cert, and then download that certificate. So there you see we've got the certificate. We'll also need the CA certificate from whoever signed the certificate. So you'll see I just downloaded those two certificates. I'll need to know what the names of files were, so 5 and 6. Then we'll go back to the appliance console and we can configure our new ZENworks reporting server. First, we'll give it a local account name. So I'll just call mine administrator and set my password. When I hit next, then I can specify which domains I want to configure. If I'm going to be reporting against ZENworks, then what I would do is I would come in here and say add domains from a management zone. I'd give it a server to go to, as well as an administrator username, and tell it whether I wanted the ZENworks domain or the audit. When I say test, it'll validate that it can make a web connection to that server on that port. You'll see in this case it was successful. So I can add that, and you'll see it's going to bring in the 11.4.1 version of each of those domains. If I am using something else, I'd do this by file. We'll actually see this in a video around how to configure the Micro Focus desktop containers domain, or how to configure the service desk domain. So for now we'll say next. Then we can specify the certificate. You can see I can either do an internal certificate, in which case the system automatically generates it and you don't have to worry about it, or I can do external certificate. Since I have the external certificate that we already did, we'll go get the two certificates. So the first one is this cert new. The second one is the server certificate that we downloaded. So these are the certificates. The system will check to make sure that this certificate was issued by that root. Assuming that's all done, then you hit finish and it will then go into the configuration. If you want to see what's going on with the configuration in a little more detail, you can hit view configuration log and you'll see each step as that happens. You can leave this page. If you come back to this page, it'll tell you where it's at. So we'll let this do an install and then we'll come back when it finishes. So we've now completed the installation. If we want, we can go over and look at the log, make sure there weren't any errors, but you'll see here everything's green, so we're good. We'll hit close. We're now taken to the ZENworks reporting configuration page, which will just show us a quick summary. This is where you'll come if you needed to add additional information, such as the email server configuration, for instance, if you wanted to specify how ZENworks reporting should send email, you'd specify your server here as well as the email address and password necessary to authenticate. This is also where you'd add user groups. This is where you'd configure LDAP. So the next step of this is typically to configure your LDAP. So I'll go ahead and click Add. I'll enter my DNS name of the server that's going to do this. In my case, I'm using SSL. I'll then specify the credentials of a user who has rights to read the users that I want to be able to authenticate to the system. I'll say test. In my case, it's using a untrusted certificate, so I'll accept that. I can add that. Now I've configured LDAP. The next thing that I have to do is I have to configure the user groups so that people can log in. So I could go ahead and say I want to look at just part of the tree. In my case, all of my groups and such are under here. And then I could say search and pick the group that I want to have access. In my case, that'll be the ZENworks admins group. It doesn't have to be ZENworks admins. It can be any group. You can have multiple groups. Whoever should be able to log in and create reports. We'll say OK here. Once that's done, you'll notice that the star indicates what's been changed. I can then say apply the changes, and it will then go ahead and reconfigure this so that my users can authenticate. And when it comes back, we're ready to go ahead and take it for a test drive. So we've now finished applying those configuration changes. So we should be ready to go ahead and access the reporting console. So we'll click that, and you'll see it switches over to the 8443 port. That's where the actual ZENworks reporting console is. This is where you'll create reports. You can then log in using your normal LDAP credentials, assuming that you're a member of the group that was specified in your configuration. And so you should be able to log in, and if you did the ZENworks domain like I did, there will be a bunch of existing canned reports. So you could simply come in here and just do a quick execution of one of the canned reports to verify that connectivity is working and you're able to actually run a report. So I'll go ahead and say, okay, apply that report, and it will go out to the ZENworks database and bring me back information about all of the bundles that I have in my system. Subsequent videos for ZENworks reporting will teach you how to create ad hoc reports, how to execute existing canned reports, how to customize reports, so on and so forth. So what you've seen here is how to install and configure your appliance so that you can begin to use the advanced capabilities of ZENworks reporting to really give you more information about what's going on in the system. You can even create some really nice dashboards that you could put up on like a big screen monitor, for instance, that would help people understand what's happening in the system. Thank you for joining me.